Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Zoom conversation today with our three artists. My name is Marin Williams, and I am the Site Galleries Programming Director. This afternoon, our virtual program has closed captioning. So to use that feature, if you can click on the CC button on your Zoom screen in the bottom corner. I'd like to start this afternoon's program with a quick introduction to Site Galleries for those attendees who might be unfamiliar. And then I'll introduce our program and our panelists for the day. Site Galleries is a student-run organization dedicated to the exhibition of student-made artwork and functions as a hub for individuals from every part of the institution to converge around ambitious development of artistic, conceptual, and professional practices. The site team is led by 5 student directors who work closely with artists, gallery, and professional staff and the wider SAIC community to select and facilitate a number of exhibitions each school year. We exist to reflect, interrogate, and elaborate the myriad aesthetic, social, and philosophical concerns of the SAIC student body and serve as a platform for meaningful exchange. For today's program, we'll be talking with 3 artists who exhibited or are exhibiting this fall at Site Galleries. So I'll first kind of share a little bit about each artist, let each artist give a brief introduction to their practice, and then we'll get into our conversation. Just before we get into it, we'll have our conversation, and then the last 10 to 15 minutes will be open for Q&A from attendees. Throughout the conversation today, please feel free to write comments or questions in the chat box. And then during the Q&A portion, you can either write into the chat box or you can write using the Q&A function, and I will read those questions aloud to our panelists. So our first artist who exhibited this fall is Olya Salimova, and her exhibition was Beeswork. It was on view in the Site Sharp Gallery from September to October. Olya is in her final year of her BFA with a focus in painting and sculpture. Her exhibition centered on a variety of her works that were all created in part using beeswax. Her works explored how bees can be seen as a metaphor for artistic labor. Also integral to Olya's exhibition was an opening day performance and a daily performance that took place each morning throughout the run of the exhibition. Olya, would you like to say a few things?
Yes, sure. Hello. I mainly am preoccupied with transformation in my work due investigation of material and experimentation with material. And in my case, this is beeswax. And I also view artistic labor as a ritual in itself, as a basis for myth, storytelling, and legend. In my work, in my show, Beesworks, I tried to have this multiple conversations and I presented pieces which were combined by or joined by the metaphor of bees and bees labor.
Thank you. Our next artist who exhibited this fall was Elisabeth. Elisabeth exhibited her work in the Site 280 building from September to October. Elisabeth is in her final year of SAIC's Master in Fine Arts program and is also the director of Studio Lab in SAIC's Painting and Drawing department. Elisabeth's exhibition, Ache of Erosion, looked at the various ways erosion is happening around us and displayed the ways that Elisabeth interrogates actual materials used to combat erosion in her paintings. Elisabeth?
Hello. Thank you, Marin. My name is Elisabeth. Yeah, I'm a painter. These are some images from my exhibition, Ache of Erosion, which Marin was just describing. In general, very, very interested in material, the material of paint largely, so pigments and different types of adhesives. I explore this pretty heavily in my work. And I think of this type of material exploration as a mechanism for inquiry, really. I think of paint as artifice. I think of paint as surface, surface to experience, as a space to enter into, and mostly just as this kind of like crust that we all exist on, something that kind of defines its own parameters and terms. It kind of like is a world of itself, and then stops, and then is on top of a canvas or a panel or what have you. And I think that's something that's quite unique to the process of painting. My works are looking at space in a variety of different ways. The types of spaces that I'm interested in are both natural and constructed by humans. So it's this co-evolution of the natural, or more uncontrolled, as well as like our own sort of human mitigation. So I think all of the sites that I'm interested in as subject matter that I gain inspiration from have this sort of dual identity that kind of defines them. I'm very interested in spaces because they so much define the way we move through the world. They impact us and we impact them, just through this simultaneous existence. And I do think about these spaces and the works that I make as kind of a poetic metaphor for how we understand existence in a more broad sense. So thank you.
Thank you. And then finally, we have Parinda Mai's exhibition, 12 Kalpas, from terrestrial to celestial and everywhere in between, which just opened yesterday in our 280 gallery and will be on view until December 15th. Mai is in her final year of her MFA in film, video, animation, and new media department. A little bit of a mouthful. The exhibition features 2 films that question nature, gender, binary, technology, and transcendence by focusing on the folktales that Mai grew up hearing. Mai, would you like to say a few things?
Yeah, thank you, Marin. My name is Mai, or Parinda Mai. I work with mostly video and multimedia installation. This project, under the umbrella of 12 Kalpas Tale, is the focus of my practice in the past few years, which include physical installation, short film, digital imagery, virtual installation. And this exhibition, from terrestrial to celestial and everywhere in between, is part of this umbrella project, which will culminate in a short film that I'm currently working on that will finish next year. That is my thesis film.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for sharing a little bit. So before we get started, I just wanted to let everyone know that if you're interested in seeing photos or videos of Olya or Elisabeth's exhibition, those are available on our website. And then to see Mai's exhibition, which again is currently on view in the 280 gallery, the gallery is open Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. and Saturday, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. And if you're outside of the SAIC community, please email us and we can schedule a time to have you come visit. So without further ado, we'll get into our conversation today. So really, we'll just be talking with Olya, Mai, and Elisabeth about their experiences exhibiting at site and some connections that might exist through their work and how they're thinking about the work. So I thought to kind of get us started, we'll start by talking about your experiences exhibiting at site, which first deserves a big congratulations because it's a big process. There's a lot of work involved, and Elisabeth, Olya, both of yours are closed now and were wonderful, and yours opened yesterday and looks incredible. Everyone should come see it. So maybe you all could start first by talking a little bit about why you decided to propose an exhibition with site to begin with. You know, what were your motivations or desires behind doing that?
Yes, sure. I think it's such a wonderful opportunity to see your own work in space, and also to allow audience to see it, because when you do it, not only as an artist, you reflect on your work and discover some other possibilities which potentially can happen after show, but also to generate conversations around it. And I must say that a lot of conversations would never happen without this exhibition for me. It's also a great opportunity to connect with other artists. I got introduced to many people whom I view as potential collaborators in my future projects. So that was basically, all of this were motivation for me for applying to site galleries. Of course, the played of artists who have already exhibited on site is fascinating, and a lot of them are very successful. And it's been an honor to be among these artists, having this opportunity to know site better and to include site as a in my resume as my first solo venue.
Yeah, I think those are all really great points that I agree with as well. I think another thing I would to add for me, what sort of inspired applying for site was in a lot of meetings with advisors and stuff, faculty would be like, "Oh, cool, yeah, like I like this painting, but let's talk about like what would happen in a show, like with these things together." And I would always sort of be like, "All right." You know, I hear that, but also right now I don't have a show. I'm just sort of making paintings. And I think there's a shift in focus when you're sort of thinking about like a hypothetical, yeah, like I'll be showing these works together, versus, oh no, I'm actually writing a proposal to show these works together. And how does that mindset flip? Like, how do you sort of put them together, and what happens when you do that? What sort of maybe gaps in the works that you're making suddenly, you know, present themselves and need to be filled in order to sort of round out a show or an idea or a theme that you're wanting to present. So I think it's a cool opportunity to kind of flex some of those muscles and like learn, okay, yeah, like what does it feel like to actually do this? And how can I think about my work as it informs each other through this new lens that you might not have the opportunity to do just, you know, working like one-off pieces, or, you know, just like small bodies of work for a critique kind of thing. So it was a great opportunity to do that for me.
For me, I think in my practice, I have been kind of dancing around this rhymes of video and sculpture or video installation for a while now. And being in space and experiencing an artwork is very important to me. And I think from my experience as a graduate student here, I feel that we don't have a lot of space otherwise. Like we have like the space in the studio, but that's very different from like a gallery space. And thinking forward in terms of the MFA show, we also won't have that much access to space, or like what we can do with that space. And I think for me, this opportunity is actually really incredible in helping me realize my vision, because I really feel that my video work needs to be experienced in space that is not the theater. Yeah.
That's great. And I guess maybe this kind of lends itself, I feel like Elisabeth, Maya, you both were kind of touching on this, but has exhibiting with site changed the way you're thinking, not just about the works you exhibited, but like your practice as a whole? Or yeah, like, I guess what impacts, I mean, it's still happening for you, but, you know, what impacts do you think that might have on your practice kind of moving forward?
I guess I could start. For me personally, it is actually feels really incredible to see my moving image work in space that is very well organized with help, like I would call professional install team help. And it makes me really excited because it feels like I've been thinking about this for a few years now, like, but to actually see it happening but to also be kind of completely honest, I have access to this space for 1 week during the installation period, which I understand perhaps in like future shows or galleries, like you also won't have access to that space like forever either. So there's a limit there. But it really makes me think that in the future, when I set up my own studio, like I want to have access to space that will mimic this kind of gallery space, or like well organized space that is not just kind of like a corner of my studio as much as possible, because it impacts how I view my work, or specifically like the moving image on the material installed in space is very different from like looking at it as a rectangular shape on my screen on my computer. So yeah, I think that is a real shift for me.
Yeah, and for a little bit of context for our viewers, Mai is currently exhibiting one video on stones. I think is that like a kind of like a little rock wall, and then also on animal hide. So experimenting with these really unique ways to view these videos.
I too was grateful to have a little bit of space to play around. I work out of a home studio, and so kind of like the fanciest situation I can schlep my paintings into is like, I'm just gonna like lean this against the couch or the fireplace or something. So to kind of get them out in like proper lighting in a white gallery, I was like, whoa, you're looking pretty dapper, you know. So I think it kind of allowed me to see my own work a little differently. And yeah, again, just like the process of putting a show together was super cool. And I think in writing the proposal, I was able to be like, oh, you know what would really round out this idea that, you know, in my show, I was sort of, you know, came up with this central theme talking about erosion and as poetic metaphor. And a vast majority of the works were already, well, I guess like 2/3 of the works probably were already completed when I submitted my proposal. And then I was able to like kind of include some of the work I was currently working on, and then also propose like one final like series of paintings that kind of rounded out the exhibition. So that was for me, the process kind of looked, and it was really great. Like the like last series, the Sediment Sentiment period series, for those who saw the exhibition, I think really brought everything together for a lot of viewers, and maybe for myself too. So I think now, having done that and having seen that, I'm able to kind of look at the work as I'm making it in a slightly more holistic way, having seen it kind of come to fruition in that manner. So yeah, that is something that I think I've gained that has kind of changed or helped to further shape the way I'm looking at my practice.
Yeah, for me, I think it may sound strange, but I think the exhibition I had allowed me freedom. You know, it sounds strange, like we artists can do whatever we want, but in the same time, I never thought before that I could combine in one space objects I create, performance around them, performance about my artistic practice itself, and also language. And that was the first time when I used language, when I put words on the wall. And that was the first time when I actually brought my art ritual in a space for other people to observe it. And that only was possible because of the space. And it was only possible because of a lot of thoughts that could be born only within a framework of this exhibition.
And that kind of leads me to another thing I wanted to talk about, Olya, which is that for Olya, your exhibition, and also Elisabeth, you both had a daily practice. So Olya was doing a daily performance, and Elisabeth, you were doing your erosion case study, which if you all visit Elisabeth's Instagram, you can check out. It's really interesting. But I guess, like, how did having that alongside your exhibition, like, what were your motivations for wanting to have that? And then also, did that come up, was that generative for you all?
For me, it was like the best, the best choice I've ever made. I think so. Just to speak for just 1 minute, not even a minute, for a moment about my project. For every day that my exhibition was on display, I walked to Lake Michigan, which is near to my house, and took an image. I just documented this same exact spot every day, just like with one image. And so it's this sort of like little daily pilgrimage to observe change or the lack of change, and just to promote this idea of like looking and awareness and engaging and stuff like that. I learned so much from it. It was also just a lot of fun. And it brought me a lot of like sanity and grounding in a time that was pretty like, there's like a show up. It's kind of busy and it's kind of crazy and very like emotionally draining in all exciting ways, but it was a lot of those things. So to have this sort of like daily like return to the source and return to the inspiration and kind of like giving away to the elements and to the thing that kind of inspired the exhibition altogether was like for me so like rejuvenating and like replenishing at a time where like my energy was very much like being given away quite readily. So I guess in terms of like what led me to do that, I think one thing people don't talk about nearly as much as we should within the art world is like, you should like what you're doing. You should like enjoy it and you should want to do it. I think there's a lot of conversations about like, risk and sacrifice and all these like very deep things that that go into an artist's practice. And I think all of that is like super important too. But bottom line, if you don't enjoy what you're doing, it's like really hard to keep doing it, So for me, that daily practice was just like a wonderful like reminder and rejuvenation for myself throughout the run of my exhibition.
My case, well, as I mentioned, I'm interested in in ritual and like inventing my own mythology, sort of. And I view art making itself as a ritual. And to me, going into the exhibition space and really creating art there as like revealing my daily activities, sort of, it stimulated me to go deeper into the like storytelling, and that's where it was my space to like other myths to be born. And I feel like insects, in my case, bees, or any kind of natural phenomena or rocks, they participate in creation of myths and story and legend. So I guess, yeah, I guess this is important for me as an artist to create more interesting work with interesting storytelling behind it.
Great. So I feel like so far we've been talking about like all of the really nice, fun things about site, but I'm also interested to know what challenges you all came up against in setting up your exhibitions, or was there anything that you really felt you had to overcome in order to see your visions come to life?
I can start.
Yeah.
Well, I think for me, the media itself is like a bit of a challenge, which like I have heard is not like unheard of. Like even if you work with like outside galleries and stuff, this thing will keep happening. Yeah, so I don't. I guess I don't know if it's like okay to mention, but like one of the projectors kind of like had a spark. um, like as we installed, and yeah, I think that the media and like some of it is a little old, but overall we made it work, and they're like yeah, eventually it worked. So yeah.
A challenge for me was curating my own work, because as for any artist, my work was scattered in different locations in my studio, in my home, in my other rented apartment. And it was challenging, even logistically, to bring everything together, but then decide what should stay here, what makes sense, and what maybe is a subject for another show. And of course, there were parts which were not challenging, but kind of things which I've never thought about, even like how to attach some of the pieces, to the surface. Is it a ceiling or a wall or a floor and so on. And I guess this is something always is worth thinking when you make your work, just thinking about this kind of like, hardware and different possibilities of the piece exist in space.
I had no issues like that at all because my show was just paintings. Just like, the whole install team was so fabulous. They were like, oh, what are you going to need? Any certain hardware? I was like, just some screws, like just a few even. For me, I think the biggest challenge was in just managing time, and not in like, oh, it was hard to get it all together. It wasn't like managing time in that way, but it was sort of like, it's just kind of like a big undertaking. It's like a long process. You have to like meet with all the individual site directors like multiple times to kind of discuss these different timelines and how they come together. So it's like quite a time commitment, and to kind of be doing all those things while balancing, like, I like work full time at the school and stuff. So it's just like a lot to balance in that way, both like logistically time wise and also kind of emotionally, as I'm, trying to like prioritize studio time and prioritize like finishing out the works for the show. So I think that for me was like the biggest challenge, was just sort of like keeping the balancing act going as as leading up to the show.
Yeah, and I think that like goes back to what you were saying before, Elisabeth, about you have to enjoy what you're doing, because it is going to be a long process, and if you're not getting some kind of enjoyment out of it, then who is it serving? Okay, I also wanted to get into some questions about connections between all of your exhibitions. So I know I have ideas of how I think they connect, and I will offer those up, but I would also love to hear how if you all see any connections, or if in seeing somebody else's exhibition, you feel like, oh, that's really resonating with my work. And then I'll offer my kind of perception.
Yeah, I see a lot of connections too. I noticed that since I have already been talking about myth, this is one thing. Either it's a poetic dream of eroded earth, or it's a inherited myth from childhood. It's a tale, or it's invented human dreams about bees. All of this is, I think, this is what unites these three shows. And also it's investigation of theme and concepts through material. That's another thing which I see. And time. For some reason, I think about that all these works somehow deal with inevitable erosion, erasure, decomposition. They all refer to history somehow. Like if you look at bees, the habitats of bees can be compared with prehistoric primordial hut for a human. We look at caves, the same thinking, temporality, and we look at eroded earth, our complicated with time relationships with our planet.
That's so the other ones you mentioned, the first like two, I definitely saw. I hadn't thought about the concept of time before though, but as you were saying it, I was really thinking through, like, I absolutely agree with that, because like you're really talking about these like folk tales that have been kind of passed down through generations, and this idea of like prehistory, like caves, like prehistoric caves. And Olya, you're also talking about some folk lores and folk tales in some of your works as well. And then Elisabeth with the erosion as well.
I think for me, sorry, I would just add.
No, you go.
Yeah, I would just add one thing. Like, I think when I see all of our works, I was even like joking with, or not so joking with, like Olya and Elisabeth yesterday, that like I actually feel like three of us could have like a group show. I don't know. Well, I don't mean to be presumptuous, but I do feel like there's a connection. And I think for me is the anthropogenic conditions that our works are like pointing to in like, yeah, in a broad sense. And there are some very specific things about materiality that I think, yeah, could be discussed further for sure.
Yeah, I do think that underpinning idea of time is an important one. And I think we're all in very different ways are examining that. I do think that the like kind of speed and pacing of Olya and Maya's works and the way they kind of like activate the gallery space, being like, Olya had some like works coming down and installed in various sort of like very directional manners, and Maya's show is kind of activating space in that similar way too. I think the speed in which the viewer sort of like takes those works in, I think there's some symmetry there, absolutely.
And I would almost add to that's, I mean, we've talked about this before, but Elisabeth, in the way that you're shifting the picture plane and how you're viewing these different landscapes, like that kind of folds into those ideas as well. I also would love for you all to talk a little bit about the different materials you're using, because they are so, I mean, you're all using different materials, but they are so unique in that, and they all seem also to have like a connection back to the natural world, kind of like what you were saying, Mai, with the anthropogenic connections. Like Olya through using the beeswax, and then Mai, you're using these hides, and Elisabeth, you're using like actual erosion blankets and perlite, things that are used to combat erosion. So wondering if you could each maybe just talk about, you know, why you're gravitating towards these unique materials in your works.
I think I'll go first. Yeah, my I mean, my exhibition was more about people and complicated sort of a metaphor of bees than about the bees themselves. And so, because it's about people, and because I mean, beeswax is a product which another non-human body produces. In a way, it is some other living body present. And the choice of material here, I think, is evident, like to talk about humans through other living body, because fat and wax are so like similar, even on this level, on physical level. And I also thought that this is a material which is both pliable and also hard, and it allows such a wide range of experimentation. And this is an ultimate material for creation to me. That's why I've chosen it. But also the research of the material itself led me into thinking about time, thinking about, again, like storytelling, because we know that bees during the history of humanity were symbols of different symbols, like in religious symbols. They were used in, you know, as a beehive was used as a model of society, where one bee, the relationships between a bee and the hive was viewed at the level of a cell and the body, whether social or physiological. So there are many narratives behind bee and behind beeswax, how it was used in during the history of human being. We know that the first writing surfaces were rocks covered with beeswax on which you could scratch, and that was before parchment paper. Parchment, right? You don't say parchment paper. So
I didn't know that. That's so cool.
So all of this informed my desire to use this material.
Yeah, I think for me, there's material, like in terms of like studying the materials of painting, pigments and adhesives, and kind of learning material very much as a language. You know, this is like, these are the tools that I have to communicate as a painter. And you know, what does this word mean? Like what does it mean if I arrange it in this order, almost like in a syntactical sense? And what does that evoke? Like the way paint sits on a surface evokes very different things. And I think when an artist is able to step away from paint, or, you know, just to speak a little more broadly, from material as image, right? Like just in service of representing an image, whether it's, you know, representational or abstract, it doesn't matter. I think you start to look at the identity, you start to consider the identity of what am I using here? And like, what does that mean? What does its surface in relationship to my own body mean? And what sort of possibilities can that present? I think for me, that's central, definitely. And so when you're a painter interested in material and also interested in like the natural and constructed world, you find a lot of like rhyming throughout, you know, like there's like, okay, this, Marin, you mentioned the perlite understructures that I used in several works that were in my exhibition. So like perlite is that white puffy stuff in soil that looks like styrofoam, for those who aren't familiar. It's intended to kind of like aerate the soil, but perlite is also, it's a volcanic glass. It's hydrated obsidian that's kind of popped like popcorn and expanded to 13 times the size of what it originally was. So it's a mineral, and pigments are minerals. And I use perlite, like artist grade perlite, the mineral, in painting. And then perlite is also used as like a very lightweight filler in construction projects. So the way it's sort of like, okay, this is the thing, you know, it's in the earth, I'm depicting this. It's also in these, often in, you know, different construction sort of filler purposes. And it's also this fine art thing. So the way, the identity of the thing, it's like chasing its own tail, you know, and I feel like the examination of that is almost trying to, for me, is like trying to get down to like, what is the identity of this thing? Not just how can I employ it or how can I use it in depiction, but like, what is it? And how is that a concept that I can allow to resonate within the work?
Yeah, it seems like, and I'll let you jump in a sec. It seems like for Olya and Elisabeth, for the both of you, there's a lot to do with like the history of the material in bringing that in, and in that decision, like to bring it in, and kind of all the different ways that it intersects.
I feel like I already forgot the original question, but I guess we were talking about something about material in our work. So I would say, because I've been kind of concerned about this topic of nature and what is nature for a few years now, and that leads me to explore. I took a few sculpture classes and sculpture seminar in my first year, and I found that the discussion in those classes, or along with like this topic that I'm interested in, has led me to this field called like new materialism, or like object-oriented ontology, and those are like really big terms, and like there's like such deep and rich investigation and concern about the material itself, how to view it, what it is, how to use it, or not even how to use it, and versus like when I'm in the film video discussion, the discussion will kind of lead to somewhere a little different, even if it's like the same dialogue. And the strategy of moving image is a representation, or like is a virtual representation of the actual material. And while like the moving image rhyme is like excites me, and I love it, like the combination of sound and image and how it could kind of mimic consciousness, like I love that. But it's also very different from like new materialism and like the investigation to material in a way that, say, Elisabeth talks about. And I feel like I have been wanting to really like find my own balance, or like my place with like between the two that are talking about the same thing, but have very different approach, have very different like outcome. And so in this exhibition, I feel like I have found a good reconciliation in some way of like, I really want to use like actual materials, and I still really want to work with virtual moving image. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to add also that one thing which occurred to me after my exhibition and Elisabeth and mine is that like we are truly like, this shows truly like products of contemporary culture, because it occurred to me that basically I see complicated relationships between humans and nature in contemporary world, because we use our material in a way, and we talk about it in a way which is not that romantic idealized way how you usually talk about nature, you know, but we like, I use a lot of beeswax, right? So kind of in a, I call it barbaric way. And that's like attitude today's attitude of humans to nature. Elisabeth's perlite is now like expanded like multiple times, like Elisabeth mentioned, to be used in different industries. and to be used in construction. And yeah, and my uses cow hides as a surface to project digital image. All of this, I think, is very disturbing. You know, it's a disturbing theme, but it's nevertheless very exciting for artists to investigate all of this. And Maya, I think I have a title for our exhibition, for 3 of us, materialization, realization.
Well, yeah, can you talk a little bit about why you find it disturbing?
It's disturbing. It's a term which I use for myself when I see artworks with tension. I'm not saying disturbing in some negative way. Disturbing means to me as a tension, where an artist tries to find reconciliation between the material, between the value of material for nature, but also this barbaric way we use it, you know, in the contemporary world today.
All right, so we have reached the last 10 minutes. So I'm going to open it up for questions now for anyone in the audience to write in. As we're waiting for any questions to pop in, I was wondering if there's anything else you all wanted to offer up into this conversation. Okay, no, that's great. Okay. All right. So no questions yet. So I'm going to ask another question that I have been wondering, which is, I was wondering, and this is kind of going back to exhibiting at site, if there is anything you all wish you had known before you exhibited at site that you know now.
I wish I knew that. I mean, I knew that I had a team of people who would help me to install, but I didn't know that I could free myself from, I guess, I don't know how to put it. I feel like I was afraid of installation and I shouldn't have been because I had a team who could support me. So this is one thing. And another thing, as I mentioned, because it gave me freedom to experiment more with the ideas of like, what can I bring into the gallery? I feel that I could have been even more audacious. But now I know.
It's funny that you said that. Oh yeah, I feel like if I say I want to be more audacious, the install team is gonna kill me.
I feel like one thing that I wish that I knew, I wish that I had a better like understanding of like the ecosystem that is site, because I think that like there's like Marin is the programming director, there's like directors of installation, there's director of like marketing, there's like all these different parties, and I think on like the proposal and like the artist end, without necessarily having insight into that structure, it's like hard to know. I felt like it was hard to know at times, like, oh, who am I talking to now? And like about what? And are those people talking? So I feel like I wasn't sure always how to navigate like the communication structure, and having a little better like understanding of that, maybe it would have like made things a little smoother in terms of like who to reach out to, when, and about what exactly. But it is also kind of what makes it really cool, because there's like, you know, as opposed to like a lot of galleries might just have like 1 or 2 people that are kind of running all of the communications. Like, just for example, working with Marin on programming was just like really exciting, because she's just like super passionate about it and very dedicated to like having those conversations. So that like sort of complex or like, you know, unknown structure from the outside also allowed for like really intimate and directed conversations about like, okay, like what could programming look like in regards to my own work? Like what are the important things that I'm trying to accomplish in that realm? And, you know, having someone like and like committed to, you know, seeing that through was just really cool.
Yeah, and I will say it's a learning process for us as the site directors as well, which is great, which is why we're all involved. Okay, we have our first question. So the question says, exhibitions are no longer just paintings on a wall. Do you find inspiration or ideas looking at other artists' exhibitions and how they incorporate some more unique elements into the space? Has there been an exhibition in particular in the past that has had an impact on you? It's a hefty question. It's a good one.
Is it directed to which person in particular?
Nope, it's open for anyone.
I'll take a stab at this. I think, I don't know, when I think about shows that I've seen, I don't think about that many shows. Like, I think about really just a few shows that I've seen, some of which have just totally like flipped my world over, you know? And I think that being able to see work in person and have your world flipped is such, it's really like what's so great about art, you know? And I think it depends. I think sometimes, like one example of an exhibition like this for me was Julia Fish had an exhibition at the DePaul Art Museum, which was on this, I don't know when it opened exactly, but I think it must have been like the fall through the winter of like 2019 to 2020, I think. I know it closed right before COVID, so I think that lines up. But that the works, and it wasn't even about like the show in its totality, because it was quite a large exhibition, but just like those works were vibrating off the walls, and from across the room, I couldn't even see that, you know? And then when I got up close, it was just like it wouldn't sit still. And I think being able to have that type of like reorientation of how you look and how you see is mind-blowing and unbelievable. And is why, you know, I make work, you know, it's why I make work. So I do like, yeah, so there's, I'm not gonna like reread all of the parts of the question right now, but that is like how I would respond to that.
That's great. And in the interest of trying to answer another question before our time is up, someone else has asked, what was a particularly meaningful moment of feedback or response to your work as it was shown?
I feel like mine, that is still showing, like I feel like I'm still like receiving and digesting, processing a lot. But just like yesterday, or even like during the install period, like I noticed that some people walk into the space and like walk out quite quickly, or like not like, oh, I'm gonna leave now, but like and then already have a feedback, like already have, like, because they came to talk to me, and I noticed that like there's no way that they already like look at all the work, kind of like with all the duration that it has, which is completely fine with me. And in some way I prefer it. Like I like it that way too. Because like if I'm like concerned about the actual duration of the work, like I think showing my work in a theater would be a better way. And like for me, like those are the moments that I actually feel like really satisfying, and I hope they really mean it. Like I hope it wasn't like being nice, like yeah. So I think that those moments were helpful for me to see that like, oh, some people do just kind of like absorb the atmosphere of the work, and something that already does something for them. And that is true for me too. And of course, like a deeper investigation is important, and is important to me, and I want it to happen, but it also doesn't have to like happen for everybody or every moment. Yeah.
That's a really interesting point, Mai, about, since your work is video based, just thinking about how different it would be to view it in a different space versus in this like very curated, like focused situation, and how there's very different things to connect with in this space at site. Does anybody else have anything they want to add to that question?
Well, maybe I'll add that also it was surprising for me. I mean, I don't know why it was, but it was surprising for me to notice that people were talking about antibacterial qualities of wax. And I think it's something which would never be in conversation without the pandemic situation. So that was informed by the situation when my exhibition took place. Yeah, so I thought that was interesting.
I had a lot of fun learning, hearing from people who are quite familiar with my work already, like friends and family, and colleagues and peers, who were able to see something in my work, and maybe even like they had seen that painting like dozens of times, to the point where they might not even be like really looking when they see it, kind of thing. It was really cool for me to hear about people's responses of like, oh my gosh, I'd never noticed this before in this piece, or I'd never observed the connection between, X and Y, and things like that, of just, that sort of, reopening, or these realizations that kind of came from the show, from people who know my work quite well. That was a wonderful thing to experience, and also helped me to kind of reopen my own eyes, and to kind of realize things that I may have kind of glossed over as well. And I do think just in response to what you said, like I had a lot of people throughout the course of my exhibition that like saw it the once and then went back, and then had a totally different experience of it, and were able to kind of share that with me, and share their own experience in that way. So for the people who may have just like popped in and like, taken it in a moment, I'm sure they'll go back, I'm sure they'll go back, and I'm sure they'll experience more, and have like a deeper, richer experience, and like more to reflect on and share. And I think, that throughout the run of the exhibition was a pretty exciting piece for me, was seeing that, how it grew and changed for people.
All right, well, we are past 1 o'clock, so I just want to say a big thank you so much to everybody in attendance for our conversation today. Thank you so much to our artists for taking the time to kind of get together and have this conversation that we've been thinking about for a while. It's been so wonderful to be able to be in conversation with you and have you all three in one place. So thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for bringing us all together. That was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Marin, and also thank you, Lindsay, who's behind the scenes emceeing this whole thing.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, the team who has helped make it.
All right. Bye now.
Bye, everyone.